Jason Kelly, Wamba Wemba, Reserve Member representing Wamba Wemba Aboriginal Corporation.
First, I want to start with, of course, acknowledging Wurundjeri country, but I also want to acknowledge all of my Assembly members and also my family that's in the room. The children and the grandchildren of Alice and Alf Kelly and Auntie Mary and Uncle Les Briggs, and want to acknowledge two of my most immediate elders that are here present too, my father Danny Kelly and Uncle Paul Briggs. This is my third time on the Assembly. I'm lucky and honoured enough with 7 others, I believe, who in our third iteration. The first one, we were tasked with establishing the framework for the treaty negotiations, of which that we inserted that truth-telling would be incorporated in that, which wasn't in the original roadmap, because we wanted to make sure that the truth-telling underpinned treaty and future treaty negotiations, and secondly, deliver on a fundamental human right for everyone else, and that was the right to know, because the things that were happening to us by the Crown, by the Victorian government, was all designed to be hidden. So we wanted to make sure that that was brought out into the spotlight and deliver on that fundamental human right. The second iteration, we were tasked with helping ensure that we established, embedded the treaty negotiations. The frameworks were put in place, and now we were helping with the legislation that delivers this body now, Gellung Warl, as a statutory body. So now we're going into where the real work is going to start, and that's around accountability. But we also must continue to elevate the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, which only defines what the minimum standards are for not just First Peoples around the world, but First Peoples here. And so we're not even meeting those minimum standards yet, but we're in a position through the accountability to ensure that we start that process, and closing the gap doesn't just remain and sit there as a bumper sticker. So I want to also acknowledge the Victorian government for actually having the courage of the first government in Australia to commit to a treaty with the First Peoples. We've seen excellent policy reform by the Victorian government in the areas we're closing the gap, but one thing that's been lacking, the one thing that I will be pursuing as an Assembly member, not only have we the world's oldest continuous living culture, we're also the most over-researched people on the planet. When you're looking at the Royal Commission into Deaths in Custodies, the Bringing Them Home report, all the inquiries that have happened in Victoria with our kids in out-of-home care and their intersections with youth justice and the failures in the education system. Whilst there's been good policy reform in that area, there's been no practice reform. So I'm here to make sure that we put a spotlight and a lens on the practices, and we close it, because Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders closing the gap can't be deemed as external disadvantages when there is a gap between policy and practice. So that's the area of focus that I will be guiding my Gellung Warl members to be looking at and strongly advocating for. But if we get that right for our kids in the education system, we'll get it right for everyone. We'll reduce our intersections with our kids not only in the out-of-home care space, but we'll also do that in the youth justice space, which will also have an effect on the adult prison space as we go down the line. And I think also one of the great things, I've had the honour and privilege to know, from being the grandson of Alice Kelly, Alfred Kelly, and having direct connection to Mungo, and seeing the relationship that my grandparents had with the man Jim Bowler, who was the man who Mungo Man and Mungo Lady found, and what that's taught him in terms of, I would say, not reconciliation. Well, it is reconciliation, but what he's learnt from that, and that the one thing we haven't really spoken about is the obligation for the other side in terms of having understanding of their obligation to meet the dreaming, to meet us. And the one thing that's never been spoken in this landscape here, if everyone else would call themselves Victorians or Australians, the commonality that we all have as being Australians is the relationship between land and people. That's the one gift and the one understanding that we give to everyone else. And if they allow themselves to be open to that, then we'll achieve much more than reconciliation. We will achieve transformation. So, but make no mistake, I'm here to put the government ministers, all department secretaries, all on notice, education, our prisoners. We just can't continue to be accepted that 80 to 90% of our prisoners are only in there because they didn't get bail. They're in there under the presumption of innocence, which seems to doesn't apply to our people. These are continual human rights violations. Uruk itself has found what we already know and what we're dealing with. Genocide has occurred. Crimes against humanity do continue. But we're here to deliver justice. But justice isn't about one group or one person winning over another. It's about us coming through this and elevating everyone else. And we can show everyone also that not just this country and our countries, there is room for us, but there's also room for multiculturalism. Thank you.